Hi there, and this is the Fall 1 session for Painting Class with Lindsay. We're going to start by going over the materials that are going to be needed for this class. Some of the materials will look different than what you have, and that's completely okay. Something that we'll need is either a piece of parchment paper, it could be tin foil, it could even be a paper plate. This is just something to mix colors on. So really it could be anything, like even a piece of paper. Sometimes paper will kind of bleed through those, so just make sure it's something that can either be wiped up later, like don't do it on, a surface that's super valuable. You could do an old dish that you don't mind getting dirty. It could be really almost anything, as long as it's okay to get dirty and either wash off later, or I wouldn't do anything, again, very valuable, as long as it's something that can get dirty and can be washed. But like I said, I'm going to be using parchment paper or wax paper. Another thing that we'll need for every class is a glass of water or jar of water. Again, paint can be washed off, but if you're going to be drinking from the jar later, that's not really recommended. So this is just water to wash the brushes in between colors. And speaking of which, we'll also need paper towels, which I didn't get. I'm just going to use a towel that I have over here that I often use. You can use an old towel or paper towels. And then the next things we'll go over are the brushes. So this is the brush I'll be using for today. It's smaller really than I'd like. This is a 1-inch brush. It'd probably be better if I had a 2-inch brush. But what I had to choose from was 1 inch or 3 inches, so I chose the smaller. But if you have a 2-inch brush, that'll be perfect for today. And then just some assorted sizes, like I have these. You might have different sizes. You can kind of see. But some medium-sized brushes, basically. And then maybe just a few smaller brushes, just so you have something to choose from when it comes time to do the smaller details. So let's see if there's anything else. Oh yes, the paint colors. Just for today, we're going to be using a magenta or red kind of color, and then you can, if it's red, you'll be able to mix it with white to make a pink. I'm going to start with this magenta color. I might even use a little bit of this pink color. And if you have like a more red color, that's good too, because you can always mix with white. Then you'll need some white, you'll need some black. Actually, I don't think we'll need white. Oh, we will need white because we're going to mix the white and the black together to make the gray. And also a blue color and a yellow color. So the blue can be pretty much anything. Turquoise is great. I don't think we'll really need it today, but we'll need it for later lessons. And then in this painting, we're gonna end up using black. But if anyone wants to save their black for any reason, you can use a darker blue like this. If you don't have it, that's okay. You won't need it today. I'm just going to use it just to stretch my black out a little bit, because whenever I add a little bit of black to something like this, it'll make it a really dark color, which is all that matters in this lesson. Okay, oh yes, and the yellow. I don't have a tube of yellow, I just have a big bucket of it, so this is what it looks like. So that's what I'm using, because yellow is nice because you can kind of start with almost any shade of yellow. Well, I say that, but probably not like an ochre. You can start with any kind of somewhat bright shade and then get what you need out of it. So the last thing for this particular lesson today is something round to use as a stencil. So it could either be a printout that's been sent over and printed out and then cut into the circle, or what I find really easy is to use something like this. This is a candle, and I could either use this as a stencil and do that, or what I'm probably going to do, because I want a little bigger circle, that's the bottom of the candle, is do that. And then what I'll do is use a pencil. And before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and grab my pencil. I just saw it, but I need to go find it again. Actually, sometimes what I do is just use the paint and then end up painting over it, but for y'all, I'll try to do it a little more professionally. But if there's any of these materials that you don't have, feel free to pause this replay. If you're watching live, you've got a couple of minutes while I go fetch the pencil. And if there's anything else that you don't have and you need to text me about it, feel free to ask any questions before continuing. Okay, I will be back in just a moment. Okay. So give everyone just a second to get caught up, make sure everyone has the materials that are needed, and make sure that I went over everything already. And then the first thing we'll do to start is to start mixing. Actually, before we kind of really get started, I'm going to just say one principle that I love to tell students whenever, especially if they're just starting out. In paintings, one of the best things that I ever learned, or I don't know if I figured it out or what happened, but at some point it came to me that when paintings are done, they need to be done background to foreground. So we can look at our example from today. You may have seen it. Everyone should have a copy of it. If you don't, please feel free to text me for that. So in this case, if you're looking at our painting for today, there's a pink sky. And so what we're going to do is paint the pink sky first. And you'll also notice in the background that the last row of mountains and the middle row, I should say, the last row of mountains and the middle row of mountains both have the pink mixed in with it. So we'll need to work what's called wet on wet. So that'll be the pink background. And before we start painting, we'll also mix a bit of gray together. So it will be pink mixed with that gray. And if that sounds confusing, we're going to demonstrate. So let's go ahead and get started mixing the pink and then mixing the gray. And I'll walk everyone step by step through the process. Okay, so everyone should have kind of a magenta or red color. Just putting it here. And then I'm going to add some white to it. Now what you'll do is just mix a color that you like. So it should be a color that is, either matches what you're going for in your home, or just something that brings you joy, brings you peace, whichever kind of feeling you're going for. And then I just use my brush to mix things, but if you have a knife in your brush set, then that'll work too. So, okay, see how that's just mixing into a light pink. And then I may use some yellow as well, just to get a little bit of a yellow tint. If you have a tube of yellow, just squeeze it out onto the mixing palette. And just mix. And really, it doesn't have to be perfect. It can just be any color that you like. See, and to me, that kind of makes it almost like a mauve or something. So if it gets to be too much of one color that's really not what you're going for, you can always go back and add more of the original colors. So in my example, I might go back and add a little bit more of this magenta. I might go back and add a little bit more of the white. Just kind of get it back to that pinky color that I really liked. But, if you are in a home with a lot of neutrals, you might want this mauve color. That might, and actually I am in a home with neutrals, and so I might want that mauve color. But just for this example, I want to show you guys what it looks like when I get back to that kind of more bright pink. So you can kind of just see, it's very subtle difference, but especially because it's mixing in all together. But there it goes. Kind of see how it, went from a darker, or like a more neutral pink, and now it's back to a more bright pink, kind of more bubblegum now. Anyway, so that's enough of the mixing. Take your largest brush, I would say, and go ahead and start adding colors, and see how some of that yellow is coming through up there at the top. It's kind of hard to see on the camera, but there's some yellow stripes coming through, or like orangish yellow coming through here. And it's really good, actually. We don't need it to be completely solid. We want there to be a little variation because it can kind of help make something interesting. And I'm also going to take my brush and dip it into the water. So I know I did that off camera, but there's not much water. I just dipped it. I might kind of do this number on here. And all that does is just make it to where the paint is slightly thinner and just a little bit more easy to spread around, because the paint can get really thick. So that water will thin it out, which sometimes we don't want. Sometimes it's not helpful to have too much water, so it just needs to be the smallest possible amount. But let's say that you do add too much water. What you can do is just go back over it again with more paint. So let's just keep adding paint. And during the painting of the background is a good time to paint the sides of the canvas as well. I'll admit that painting the sides of canvases is not my favorite chore. But I always tell myself, well, I'd rather do it now than do it later, so. And I'm just going to do this number just to make sure it's really filled in. You don't have to, but I like to just kind of also put a vertical stroke and then go back over it with another horizontal, just making sure the paint's real thick. And now those colors really are blending together. I don't see any more of that. There's no more of that yellow in there. And it's okay if there is, and it's okay if there isn't. If there's some streaks of a different color, it just adds a little bit of visual interest to the painting. So sometimes I'll purposely add like a little chunk, a little bit. Okay. So I'm gonna keep going. Adding. Painting the sides. So go on ahead, just keep on making that pink background. And remember, anything that you do, what's nice about paint is it can always be painted over. So there's really no mistakes in painting, because sometimes you'll find, oh, actually that looks good where I thought that was a mistake. Or, oh, I don't like it, so let me paint over it. And white paint can always be an eraser. All right, so getting that color all the way down. Making sure it's really filled in. Again, with that. So now it's kind of oh, you know what, you guys? I said we were going to mix the gray color Let me get up and paint this side of this canvas over here, just make sure it's painted on the sides and the tops. But I said we were going to mix that gray color, and we didn't do it, so that's completely my fault. If you're watching before doing this, go ahead and mix your gray color. If you're painting live with me, then I would say let's just move as quickly as possible before this pink color dries. And if it does dry, it's okay. We'll just add a little bit more pink to our gray once we get going. There's no mistakes in painting. There's just, as Bob Ross would say, there's just happy accidents. So I'm gonna go ahead and add the black color going. Find the black. Okay. So I'm just putting a little bit of black on here. Just a little amount is all that's needed. And then some white. Okay, and then I'm gonna get a medium-sized brush this time. So you can just get a brush. It really doesn't matter too much which one it is, just kind of a medium size. And then we're gonna do a gray that's pretty light. So you can kind of see there how light that gray is. That's the white, and then this is the gray, so it's very close. And we're just gonna paint, I'm gonna do about 1/3 here, so and go into this background like this. You're just gonna paint little triangles. Like I said, this pink will still, not have dried. And you can kind of make the triangles. I think I might have them a little bit too light, but I actually do want them light, so not too sure yet. Let me think about that for a second. You can always add a little bit more black if you need to. I'm just gonna do a dab of black. So yeah, I'm just adding the black already onto my paintbrush. It already has gray on it. And then, yeah, I'm just gonna kind of go over it a little. And again, paint the sides. And I'm really not seeing it mix too much with that pink. Maybe a little. But if you need to, just add a little pink to your paintbrush again, and that way it's mixed a bit. So see how that gray and that pink makes it look like it's part of the sky. And you really can't go wrong. You're just painting little triangles with the gray. And if you do choose to add pink or any other color, that's completely fine. I'm just trying to go kind of light, give it a nice foggy feel. These are going to be the mountains furthest back. So I just added a little bit of black. Oh, that's just the tiniest little dot there. Just the tiniest little dot of black. And then, yeah, just gonna make this little mountain range back here. And maybe do differing heights, differing shapes of mountains. I didn't really vary my shapes too much, but you certainly can. You can kind of do one taller, one shorter. I like that they have a little bit of a foggy shape. Okay, and then just get a little bit more gray there. That's all I'm doing. And I'm going to add a shape back here that it'll kind of look like it's covered in mist. So it's going to be kind of a pagoda shape. So what we'll do to start that is just one line down the middle. And I'd recommend it being, maybe I have it a little too much into the center and I wanted it over here. So I'm going to go ahead and add another line right here, a little bit taller. There we go. Okay. And then another line over here. Okay. And make a triangle at the top of that. And see how that triangle shape is kind of the same as the mountains? That's kind of nice. And then I'll just extend these little triangle lines. And this will just be a pagoda that's kind of covered in mist. That's all we're going for here. So it can be very abstract, and you could even change to a smaller brush, which is what I might do. It can be kind of imperfect because it's covered in mist, so you don't want it to be too defined. Have it be kind of mysterious back there. And towards the bottom, I may choose to make it a bit more solid, so it's kind of a mysterious looking building in the mist. Okay, and now that I've done that, see how I was talking earlier about the foreground to the background? I really think it would be beneficial for me to go back over these mountains, because right now it looks like the pagoda is in front of the mountains, and really I want it to look like it's behind those mountains back there. I mean, you could do it either way. I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit of definition to my mountains. I'm just really just adding another layer. So that I'm looking on the screen to see what it looks like on the screen. I just want it to be foggy back there. I want it to be really undefined. But the mountains to me are a little bit closer to me, even though they probably aren't in reality. But I don't know. There's just some things about this. Okay, let's go with that. The next thing we'll do is go back to this gray. And now we're going to add a little bit more black and make a darker, like one shade darker gray. So let's go ahead and do that. Getting my black color here. So this time I'm putting quite a bit more black. And then gonna go ahead and mix some white, but not too much. But so what we're thinking here is we're gonna go from a really light gray to a medium gray to a gray to a black that's almost solid black. I mean, we can have a little bit of gray in there, but so just think of it like a 10%, a 50%, and a 90%, or something like that, kind of like a just a scale of light, medium, dark. So I'm just trying to get a medium gray, so like a 50%-ish type of gray. And then we'll kind of just make another little mountain range here, and see, I can already tell that might not be dark enough, but I'm not sure yet. And then I'm trying to alter the shapes a little bit this time so that they're a bit more interesting, because these are a little bit less in the fog. And actually that darkness does work for me. You can kind of play around and just see. And if you don't like the darkness, or if you want to make it darker or lighter, to make it darker, you just add more white. Make it darker, just add more black. And as always, feel free to text with questions or call. As part of being in this painting class is the support. Okay, so I'm trying to make it where this range is a bit more just not so uniform. And then I just added a little bit of water to my brush just to help me move the paint around onto the canvas. And then just kind of playing with it and having fun. You know, these can be fairly flat shapes. They don't have to have any special shading or anything. They can just be however they are. But I do want to encourage pulling the grayness down a bit more than I've been doing. So if you're out there painting along, go ahead and get that gray further down, because I think we're going to want that later. How fun is this? Yeah. I know, I'm having a blast. I hope everyone else is enjoying this. Thank y'all so much for painting along and having fun. Okay. So really what I'm doing here is just covering up any areas and trying to make kind of a smooth line up here. So a lot of times with canvas, I don't think it can be seen on the camera. Let me try and move the camera a bit closer. But sometimes you just want to add a little bit of water or make sure the paint's really thick so that the lines are really smooth. Just do all my setup here. I apologize. I want the lines to be as smooth as possible, because canvas will cause, or painting on canvas can make it really difficult to get smooth lines. But if you can just kind of take your time and get those lines as smooth as possible, that'll help in the long run. And again, if there's any questions, feel free to text. But also use a little bit of water and mix it with your paint. And yes, that will thin out the paint a little bit, but as long as you're aware that it's doing that, it should be okay. But it doesn't hurt to have a few layers and to kind of go over it a couple of times if needed. Okay, good. I just dipped my brush again in the water just so I can continue making sure it's really smooth. And now I'm trying to pull this gray down. I want to make sure my brush strokes do this triangle motion, because I can paint like this and fill in the gray, like with this horizontal line. But when it comes down to it, I want to make sure that the final strokes I'm doing are this triangle motion, because that's really more how mountains would be shaped, is more in that kind of arrow shape. I hope that makes sense. But what I'm doing, so I'm painting this horizontal line and then going back over again, making these arrow motions with the brush on top. So that's a technique I'll do a lot, is I'll fill in, I'm so sorry. So I'll fill in something with a stroke motion that really doesn't fit. Like mountains, you know, if they were like this, they might look kind of weird. But then to go back over it with a little water and then the color again, kind of fill that in with that arrow shape. Hopefully that helps make sense. And also, it doesn't hurt to be very imperfect on these shapes. You know, see how my shapes are kind of wonky? I mean, mountains aren't engineered by man. Thank God, you know. They're perfectly imperfect. So, I'm also filling in the edges of my canvas over here. So please do the same. Walk over to the other side and I'm going to fill in my edges over here on this side of the canvas. Right. So second range mountains seems to be done. I'm just looking at my inspiration photo. In my inspiration photo, I used a bit more of a flat arrow. Like in this one, I'm doing much more pointed mountains. So if you choose to do a bit more of a flat, you know, kind of like only 3 peaks maybe, or 2 peaks, that is completely fine. That's more than fine. This is your painting. You can alter it a bit. It does not have to look exactly like this. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start on the last mountain range, which is gonna be pretty much just completely black. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this one drop of black that I had. Just kind of separated a little, but you can always just get a new dot of black, which is what I'll end up doing when I run out. But on this one, I am going to go ahead and make my peaks. I'm going to try to make them a bit more flat. So right now I'm just kind of sketching with my paintbrush, which is just, you know, seeing where I want things to go. Maybe I'll just do 3 peaks this time. Maybe they're a bit more like hills, so they're closer to us. And this layer will also have a pagoda on it. Can be seen in the inspiration photo. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take more black and add it in. Okay. The cap of the black paint just fell on the floor, but okay, taking my black here and filling in now. And you could use either your 2-inch brush if you want to, although that might be a little bit big for this. But I'm just using a medium-sized brush. And see how when I add black to that, and that used to be gray, and now it's getting darker and darker every time I add black. That's kind of that wet on wet technique. I'm painting the sides of the canvas. And the bottom. Although I may not paint the bottom on camera, but please do paint the bottom of your canvas if possible. Although some people may be framing theirs at the end, and if it's framed, you really don't have to worry about painting all the sides and the bottom and the top, but it's just a good habit to get into. Okay, just filling in all the little crevices so that this is completely black now. I'm gonna again stand up and do this over here on the sides of this canvas. Let's just see how we're doing on time. Okay, good. We've got about an hour, which is great. Okay. So while I'm finishing this, I'm going to talk to you guys about the stencil, which we won't need for a little while, but the stencil, I think the diameter needs to be about 6 or 7 inches. You really don't have to do exactly what, is said. You could do something smaller, you could do something bigger. It's just the proportions, in relation to this canvas. I just chose something like about, I think it's about 5 or 6 inches. So just set down my palette here, and it'll be about there. So that's what I'm planning to do with mine. You can, like I said, you can do something a little smaller, a little bigger, completely fine. And we're going to continue with the black. Let me get my brush again. Okay, so we're going to continue with the black and make this pagoda shape. Actually, we're not going to continue with the black, and we're not going to make the pagoda shape because I just realized the sun is behind the pagoda, so we are going to move to the sun. Okay, so let's take that stencil we were just talking about. We will go ahead and use it now. And let me find my pencil. Okay, and then I'm just going to trace a circle. So let's see. And I know my pagoda is going to go about right. Let's see, where's that top going to be? Probably about right there is going to be the top of the pagoda. So I want the sun to actually be a little bit down. And again, this really isn't science. You can kind of fudge things. You can kind of just put that where you think it goes, but I'm just putting it up here in the upper left, towards the corner, but just where it, it's not centered, slightly off center. If we were really being scientific, we would, break this canvas up into thirds, and then, it would be the center of the sun would be on the thirds. Anyway, we won't get into all that today, but in photography, there's this thing called the rule of thirds, and it can be fun to use, but it's also fun to just have fun, not be perfect all the time. Okay, so I've got a nice little shape here. I'm just fixing my stencil, erasing the extra line that I don't need. So what I have is a very imperfect, well, I have a circle and then I've got extra lines, and I don't really like it because it's adding a bit of, there's some extra pencil marks in there that I don't want. So I'm going to try, I don't know if it'll work, but I'm going to try to go back to that pink color and see if there's any left. And luckily for me, there is a little bit left, and I'm going to just cover up my mistake. So see how that pink color can just help me right now, help me cover up that mistake. And right now you can see it, but it hasn't dried yet. So when it dries, it'll be the same color as the rest of this background. And it covers up my little pencil mark mistake. Okay, so the next step will be to mix a yellow color that will be for the sun. And I'm going to go ahead and get myself a new piece of palette. You don't necessarily need one, but it's just going to help me personally have a separate color. A separate palette for a separate color. You can always mix your yellow on top if you want to, on top of the colors you've already been mixing. Okay, so I've got somewhat of a fresh sheet. I'm using recycled palette paper, so it's got a bit of paint marks already on it. But I'm going to take my yellow color and plop it on, and just gonna see what I get out of. I want this yellow color to be a bit of a, what is the term for that yellow? I personally don't want it to be the brightest yellow. If you do want that, that is completely fine. I'm just adding some of the pink that was already on my brush, and it's kind of helping this yellow be a bit more, I feel like it's too sunny. Sorry if you can't see that, but I'm just trying to get that yellow somewhat, I'm not too sure of the word for it, but it's just a little bit darker yellow, I guess. Going from that real bright yellow out of the tube or out of the can that I had it in a can, or actually mine's in a little bucket. But anyway, if yours is yellow out of the tube, and then I add a little bit of that pink, and it just makes it slightly darker. So I'm going to use my big brush and just get the paint off the brush and put it into the circle. We'll go later with a smaller brush and do the edges. So there we go. You can always add a little bit of water to make it easier to spread the yellow around. But one thing about adding that pink color, it really helps it feel integrated into the background. So I'm going to go back to I'm washing off a medium-sized brush right now. So I have a nice medium-sized brush, and I rinsed it with water. Then I'm going to get as much color off of it as possible using a towel. And then I'm going back to this yellow color, and just going to go and add. You could use a smaller brush if you want to. There's really it's kind of your personal preference. There's no rules. It's just, I like to use the biggest possible brush that I can and still get the effect that I need. But if you enjoy using a smaller brush, please, by all means. But what I'm doing, let me see if I can get this a little bit closer. I don't know how well it's going to work. But I'm really taking pains to make this edge very, very clean. It really doesn't have to be perfect. It really is okay. Because nature is nature. It's not it's not engineered. Well, kind of, but not engineered by man. So anyway, I'm just, see how I got a little bit brighter right there? That's okay. I'm just going to go through and add it back in. And it's really nice when paintings actually aren't perfect, because they give the viewer something to look at. So embrace whatever's coming out of the brush right now. But I am working on making a really, really clean line around the edge. But if yours isn't, it's okay. Just keep going, you know. So I'm covering my pencil mark, by the way, with my edge. And let's say that you do something that you don't like. Guess what? It can be painted over with pink and you can start over again. But I would recommend just embracing whatever's happening. I recommend, just kind of going with it. Because art is fun. All right, just concentrating real hard, getting a nice clean line. Feel free to pause if you're watching the replay. Let's see, this really isn't a perfect circle. Well, obviously, there's no such thing as a perfect circle from what I've heard. But, it's not a perfect circle, but it still looks like the sun. And right now I can kind of see that it's a little, I don't know if the word's opaque or translucent, but I think it's translucent. But I'm going to just add a little bit more color into it so it has a bit of a thickness and covering up, so it really looks like the sun. I think one reason I love this painting so much is because it reminds me of that hour right before the sun goes down. It's such a nice hour when it's, if it's the summer, then the bugs are singing. It's nice. Okay. So just kind of play with it. Yellow is a pretty transparent color, so it may take some layers. It's hard to get layers, though, if you don't have time for the layers to dry. So if you are watching the replay and you want to go do something else while you wait for one layer to dry and then add another layer later, that is completely fine. But I'm going to keep adding as much as I can to try to get an idea of what it will look like. I do want it to look very solid, so I haven't really gotten there yet. Still looks very see-through. And I do want it a bit more solid than it is. And I also am covering up these pencil marks. I've got a little chunk of color, of paint into mine, and just wanted to get it out. Okay. Let's see what it looks like. I need to check mine from the screen. Okay, yeah, that's definitely looking better. I do see over here in this corner where it looks like the pagoda is coming, or this pagoda is kind of coming through. I don't want that, so I am going to add a bit more yellow, specifically in this corner where I don't want a pagoda showing through, because it is not behind the sun. Well, the sun is definitely brighter than it. Let's just say that. Although I guess technically it is in front of the sun. Okay, let me just keep painting and try to concentrate. I made a little boo-boo in mine. I may not recover, but it's okay. Let me try to get in front of the camera here. I apologize. Just doing some surgery. Doing some surgery on my son. Okay. Got it a little thick, so I'm just dabbing it with my hand. Oh. All right. So how's that? Does that work for everyone? Can you kind of see what we're going for? And it's definitely very thick, and I wish I kind of did a thin layer and then let it dry, and then did a thin layer and let it dry. I'm somewhat doing this for the sake of time, just kind of doing one thick layer, which normally I may not be totally in favor of, but that's what we're doing. All right. We'll go around this way. And let's go back to, we need our black paint again. And putting the yellow to the side, getting the black back up. Okay, it looks like we have about 40 minutes left, and we are getting very close to being done. May not seem like it, but definitely have somewhat of a painting going. Okay, so I just rinsed off my brush. I'm going to get a little bit of a smaller brush. I'm going to get something like this size, and I don't know if you can really tell what size that is. It's probably about, what is that, like a centimeter? Okay. Okay, so we've got kind of a foggy structure in the back. And I just noticed that on camera, on the screen where I'm looking from your point of view, that this little arm over here is too light. So I might want to, while I'm here, get a little bit of white and make a very light little arm. Just what I can do is kind of build it up. So I'll start light so as not to be too dark, if that makes sense. And then if it needs to be a bit darker, I can always add black, but it'd be harder to add white, if that makes sense. I'm going to start real light. Okay, so I just added that white to my palette. Going to dab the black. Okay, and see how light that is? It's real light, but let's see what it looks like on the canvas before we decide. Oh, see, that just got real dark. So adding back in some white to make it lighter. Okay, now let's look at it on the canvas and see what it looks like. Oh, see, that's way too light. Okay. So that means I'm going to add a little bit of black. I don't know how well everyone can see that. I think I'm holding it pretty well. Okay. Okay. Yes, that works for me. I do want that arm extended, which is the whole reason I'm here. Okay. But let me just make sure. I'm just being very gentle and just getting the tiniest amounts of black just to make sure it's dark enough to be part of this structure back here. There we go. And just filling it in just ever so slightly. Now I am going to add water to my brush just because that helps me blend a little bit, because it is a top coat. So we've already painted this, but I'm adding onto it. So having the water in it helps me blend it back into the color that it already was, if that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, it's okay. I'm doing things that are somewhat advanced, but I think everyone can kind of play, experiment, learn, try. Just see what works for you. See what works for your painting. You will see. You'll learn And see, now I'm here and having fun, so I'm just gonna add some more along here. Make it a bit more stylized and fun. Blend it a little more here and there if I see something that is kind of sticking out. Okay. So now I do see that being a little bit darker, so maybe I will add I'm just getting a little touch of white and adding it in to where it's already hasn't dried yet. But I'm also, so along with the white, I got my brush really wet. So anyway, just playing and repairing, and it may not be right, but that looks a little bit more like it. So if I need to, just going back over that mountain really lightly, got the water on the brush. I will say one thing about what I've done is that this back mountain range looks real rolling, like rolling hills. This middle mountain range looks real craggy. And the front mountain range, of course, looks real hilly. So just not sure how I feel about it, but I really don't mind at this point, because what I'm about to do is paint a big structure right here in front of this, kind of in front of this area. And it's going to cover up quite a bit. So let's play with that, see how it goes. And this time, let me make sure I know where I'm painting that first line. I did want, let's see, I think I want the top of the pagoda to be right here, about right there. So let me go ahead and mark that spot again. I did mark it with the pencil earlier, but just to kind of give myself a reference, but I'm gonna mark it. And see how I'm just doing it somewhere kind of off to the side of the sun, and that way it just helps me know where I'm starting, know where I'm going. And then the first thing I'll do is paint a horizontal line. It's going to be about a centimeter wide. And then I'll just start filling in this shape. I may need to get in front of the camera to really see what I'm doing. I'm painting kind of maybe a smaller brush even. I may switch between like tiny brush, not exactly tiny. This is definitely not the tiniest brush possible, but kind of a small brush. Just get those details. And really it looks kind of like a trapezoid, but it's just a bit more flared out than a trapezoid would be, if that makes sense. Kind of that Pizza Hut roof looking thing. But we'll add a little bit of flare on the bottom, just to okay, there's a little extra. We can always go back and do this later too. So if all you get is a trapezoid, that is plenty. And then we'll start adding rectangles. So see how we got a rectangle. And some of the rectangles, well, like this one will be solid, but they really don't have to be completely solid, because I'm getting the sense that the structure would have been made, out of a lot of windows or had windows in it. And then on either side of this rectangle, I'm adding little lines. So I do see that you might want to have me put the camera closer. Can you kind of see that? So what it is, it's a trapezoid at the top, there's a rectangle underneath, and there's two lines on either side of the rectangle. And then this may be somewhat confusing, but just trust that we're going to do more like this. So we started with the hardest part, which was at the top, where it's the smallest. So if this seems confusing, just keep watching and maybe start at the bottom. So, and work your way back up. But I am going to add another kind of a flare shape. Just kind of have it be, it's like the top of a trapezoid. And it's wider than the top. And these little lines extend all the way to it. Okay, so hopefully that is looking like something. Hopefully it's making sense. If it's not, I would just keep watching and maybe go back. So watch, see what's done, and then rewatch again. I'm also working to make it symmetrical, which is pretty difficult. So that's can be hard. But it also doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so I'm making just another rectangle underneath. So see that? Just building a little pagoda shape by shape. So little flare shapes, kind of like little upside down V, and then rectangles, and then eventually we'll put little lines just to show that there's something in between. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and make the next upside down V. And I may have to extend that rectangle down a little, but next upside down V. Extend that rectangle down just a bit. Okay, so see that? And again, I will move the camera closer. Right now it's not very symmetrical, so I'm just going to work a little bit on trying to get it symmetrical. It is not easy, and I've been doing this for a long time. So I'm having a hard time, so if you are, don't feel bad. It's very, very difficult. But I think you can do it. I think, keep on working and it will show itself to you. I really don't want it to be perfect because we're not computers. We're human beings. Okay, so there's that. And this could even be, this could be a upside down upside down V filled in. But it's kind of fun to leave some spaces in areas. So I'll think about, okay, maybe I want the next upside down V to be here. I'm just sketching it with my paintbrush. I'll keep filling it in as we go. Going back to a slightly bigger brush now that we're getting down to this layer. But I am going to need my smaller brush again. Okay. So now we've got another upside down V, and I'm just going to fill, let's see, I'm not going to fill it completely in. I'll go ahead and do one line, and then do another line, and another line. Not too sure how I want that to look yet, because I don't want it that see-through, obviously, but I am just kind of building things as I go, so not really worrying too much about how, not worrying too much about each individual step, just seeing, okay, how does it look overall? And I do think it needs some help, so I'll just keep going. If you're watching the replay and you haven't started yet, one thing you could do to help a little bit would be to draw one line from the top down to right here. So you could draw a line like this. And it doesn't have to be a perfectly straight line, but just a guideline. And that'll help you know how far you're going, where the center is, where to flare out from, things like that. Okay, let's see what else we want to do here. Like right now I have these two corners kind of hanging out. I don't really want that. So I'm going to go ahead and attach them just so they feel integrated into this structure. So that helps. That helps a lot. Okay, good. And then I'm going to work on flaring these out, making the little edges kind of just a little bit pointy, I suppose, if that's a word for it. That kind of reminds me of a tree. I even see in my inspiration painting that I see that those flares are a little bit upturned at the edges, so I'm just going to add a little bit of an upturn at the edges, just for style and fun. Okay. It's a pretty fun little shape there. Okay, and then I think also on the inspiration painting, I had filled in this whole section, so I may just go ahead and do that. So let me just fill in this section. I know at the top there's little windows, and we may continue with that, but I'm gonna go ahead and fill this section in. What else do we want to do here? Just notice in the inspiration painting that, these windows aren't quite so open, so I'm just going to fill in here and there just to see a little visual interest. Okay, so notice how this is definitely not perfect. And that's okay. That is more than okay. But it really helps to see the process and see, okay, even the person who originally painted this painting doesn't even know, exactly how it's done. All right. So we've got about 20 minutes left, and we're just going to continue building this pagoda, and it really can be however you want it to be. It does not have to be the same exact way that I'm doing it. So I'm going to kind of go crazy and add a little bit of some big lines here just to give me something to work with. Okay. And then fill them in a bit. They're a little bit too, I don't know what the word is, but curvy or something. So I'm going to just kind of fill in that curve. Maybe, let's see, just getting nice smooth lines. Okay, let's see what we got. Let's see. This side is very curvy. This side is not. So I do kind of like that curve. So I'm gonna try to get it. Let's see what I'm doing here. Okay, come on. Is that it? Almost. Let's keep going. Just play with it. Sometimes, it's more difficult to do without the rest of it done. So sometimes it's okay to move on to the next section, even if one section's not done. And I'm also noticing this line that I drew down the center. The center is more like on both sides here. So that helps me just visualize where the center is. So see how we're just improvising. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and add another set of those kind of curvy shapes. But see how this one over here has a little ding on the edge? Let me see how I can incorporate that. I might just have to kind of try to make it happen and then go back on the other side and make it symmetrical. Or as symmetrical as possible. Okay, that looks kind of like what I'm going for. Okay. Now, I'm going to add another set of curves, a little bit further out even. Further out. And that will be a bit of a roof of this building. So we will kind of use that as a let's see. Looks like they might need to go out just a little bit further on each side. So let's see what we can do there. Trying to look into the camera here and see what it looks like from that angle. From what y'all are seeing. Just fixing my lines down here while I have some nice water plus paint on my brush. Okay, so that's not exactly what I want, but it might work. And I say, as long as it's kind of the same on both sides, hey, it will work. So I'm just now going to try to build this up with some paint, try to make it the same on both sides a bit. And like I said, sometimes it's hard to see when it's not done. So we may just need to kind of start building the rest of the building and then get to that later. Get to the final touches later when we can see more of the building once it's done. So I am going to go ahead and do that and start building this little building here. So I'm just making a little square shape at the bottom, or a rectangle, kind of squarish, rectangle-ish. And if you're watching the replay and you want to, if you haven't started on the pagoda yet and you're just watching me, you could theoretically start at this bottom and build up, and it could be a little bit easier. Okay, just going for that little square, a rectangle shape. And then this is going to have one thick line down from the edges. And there's going to be another thick line on the other side down from the edges. And I'm going to try to do it symmetrically. It's pretty difficult. But really, we're doing art here. We're not building an actual building, thank goodness. We're doing a hand-painted painting. And what I'm seeing is I want my little main rectangle to be a little bit taller, just a little taller. And you'll see why in a moment, but because what I'm going to do next is paint these little window lines. So it'll just be a line, make it a little bit thicker. It's a little bit of a line, and a line, and a line, like that. And I might get my smaller brush. I'm definitely going to add a little bit of water to my paint so that these lines come out nice and even. Let me see if I can get this camera any closer. Just want to show you what I mean. Adding a little bit of paint to the water makes it to where these lines come out nice and even on the canvas. Because canvas will kind of tend to make things uneven because it's ridged, or it has a texture to it. Let's just say that. Okay, so trying to go symmetrical. So other side, nice thick line, and then nice thick line, and then nice thick line. And I got these lines nice and even by adding some water to my canvas. And then what I like to do is go back over, like these lines go into these main shapes. And it's really not done yet. I really look like I have a lot of work to go. But I just want to show y'all what I'm doing along the way, where I'm kind of going back over those shapes. Okay, so I see it needs quite a bit of work. I'm going to scoot this camera back because I'm not too happy with the shape of the building, but the nice thing about paint is it can be painted over. So let's go. Like I really want to fill this in. So that's one thing I definitely see is, okay, I want to fill that in. So fill that in. I'll make it look a bit more realistic. Okay, so that was one thing. I think the next thing, let's see. I'm not loving the curves on this guy. So I'm going to make these less curvy. So all I'm doing is just adding a line and making it to where it's not so round. It's kind of, but I still want the ends to be curvy if possible. So let's just experiment with that. I'm trying to see from the camera angle. Okay. We've got about 10 minutes left, so just using this time to really go back, fill in shapes, see what we like, see what we don't like. Like this line down here to me could be way thicker. It would really help feel like it's a very structural building. So I just kind of sketched it with my thicker brush, or it's not too thick, but it's my centimeter brush. So just added a kind of a thicker line. And I might make that rectangle, that inner rectangle, also a bit more thick. But let's keep going. Really, yours may look a lot better than mine. Yours may, you may know how to make things symmetrical. It might work. Okay, I'm just adding thickness. So this looks like a very structural, weighty kind of building. Okay. Now, I'm sorry, it's a little bit hard to paint on camera, so I'm seeing that it's not exactly, speaking of hard to paint on camera. Okay, I'm seeing that it's not really straight, because I'm painting from the side, so I'm really sorry. Mine's not perfectly done. And actually, there's quite a lot about this that I'm, not sure about yet, to say the least. So I think I'm just going to see what I can do to get it to something that I do like. And it may look like, doing something like this, kind of make it a bit more of a sound looking structure rather than looking like a tree. See, that to me that helps. Like that kind of thickens it, makes it, Let's just see what else we can do and see if that helps us. But either way, this has been so much fun. Even if it doesn't come out exactly as I wanted or perfectly as pictured or something like that, it's like, no, this is amazing. Like if I really just step back and say, okay, painted a pagoda completely from the side, didn't really get in front of the canvas, and so it didn't really come out as symmetrical as I'd have loved it to, but that's, it's okay. And also, paint can always be painted over. And so if you did have a mistake and you wanted to paint over it, you could theoretically mix this gray again. Like if it's something in this gray area, you could mix this gray again and repaint the mountains. You could mix the lighter gray, and then you'd need to mix the medium gray, and then you could mix this black color, or not mix, but just take the black color out of the tube, and repaint the mountains. It'd be a little harder if it was up here because you'd repaint the pink. I wouldn't recommend that. I'd say just work with what you have. Work with what you have. Try to make it symmetrical. It's okay if it's not. Let's see, what else do we maybe want to think about doing? I kind of want to think about painting these mountains back in front of this pagoda just so it looks a bit more like it's integrated into this landscape. So to do that, I'm getting a bit of water on my brush. I'm getting my really dark black out of the tube. I'm just going to paint over this again, just so that looks like it's part of this landscape. And it's just an effect that I like whenever I'm painting, is to, paint layers, paint layers, paint layers. It really helps. I always say, oh, I'm not really talented. I just paint a lot of layers. I just paint a lot of layers on my paintings. And, you can do that too. You can paint lots and lots of layers. Okay. So see how now that pagoda looks a bit more like it's in the mountains, like part of the mountains? Move that down a little so you can kind of see. So I painted the mountains back on top, and even though it's all the same color, there's just, you can just tell. There's just something about it. You can just kind of get that sense that, hey, these mountains and this pagoda are painted as one. They're all together. They go together. They're integrated, and it really helps. Okay, just gonna do any last minute little tweaks, touch-ups before it's time to go. Feel free with any questions, any comments, any feedback. It is most appreciated, and it really helps. So thank you for being here. I know it doesn't help if I get in front, and I apologize. This is hard to see from the side, but I will keep going. And again, even though this is a solid color, it does help to paint layers of it, because that just helps it feel nice and thick, nice and, what's the word? Just really like it's really there. So I almost always, even if it's a solid color like this, I'll paint a couple of layers of it. So feel free, go ahead, paint lots of layers, or at least 2. That's my recommendation. Help things feel like they're really there. And then just trying to see it from the angle that you're looking on at the camera. I can see it's just a little bit crooked, but hey, might be the canvas that's crooked, I'm not sure. All right. It is almost 7. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, there it is. And I think if I had a bit more time, I would go ahead and fill in some of this gray. I think it's easier to see that now that the rest of the painting is done, but I'd fill in some of this where I left it pink in the middle just a little bit, kind of add maybe some lines, maybe a rectangle right here in the middle or a line, just so it helps it look kind of more like this one. Anyway, that is the end of today's session. Thank you so much for joining. I hope everyone had a wonderful time. Hope everyone learned something amazing and something new and saw that you also can paint. So, see you next week. Bye-bye.